Jersey, hang on a minute. Are we streaming live? We are streaming live. Okay, I'll start over. Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of New Jersey, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board of the municipal building, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2023 to the news record and Star Ledger in December 2022, and by filing said notice in the office of the township clerk.
Ms. Adams?
Here.
Ms. Craig?
Here.
Mr. DeLuca?
Here.
Ms. Engel?
Here.
Mayor Daffis.
Here.
Whereas Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, commonly known as the Open Public Meetings Act, requires that all meetings of public bodies be open to the public. And whereas Section 7A provides that the governing body has the discretion to permit, prohibit, or regulate the active participation of the public at any meeting. And whereas desire the governing body to comply with the provisions of this act, same time to conduct its business in an orderly and expeditious manner. Now therefore be resolved by the Township Committee, Township of Maplewood, does hereby prohibit, except as set forth in the formal agenda, active participation in the deliberations of the governing body by the public, except as otherwise prescribed by law, does limit the public to the observations of the actions and discussions of the governing body at all of its regular and special meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Ms. Engel?
Yes.
Mayor Daffis.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Fritzen. Please join in Pledge of Allegiance. Since I have a flag right next to me, I shall stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's
Okay,
faster.
what's that?
Gets faster every time.
It's faster every time, right? So welcome. Good evening, everyone. Those of you who are watching us out there, we're live streaming on YouTube. Welcome to our third budget workshop. This is for capital requests tonight. We're going to hear from all of our departments, from infrastructure improvements that are necessary, to public safety, to community services, and even from open space trust fund requests as well, our parks. So we have a lot to discuss and to cover, and we welcome you to join us. We do have a public comment period at the end after we get through all of the departments, and hopefully we have members of the public who wish to engage with us this evening. We're going to start with an overview of where we are in terms of debt and overall what the requests look like by Interim Administrator Schuster. Mr. Schuster.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity. And as I did last time with the public hearing, I just want to thank Bailey and Joe for all their hard work, and also all the department heads who have contributed. This is a long process to get to where we are, and we look forward to hearing all of your feedback. We try to construct a budget, both operating and capital, that's reflective of the community. And you're the ones who are out there interacting with the community on a day-to-day basis. So your feedback is definitely needed throughout this process. So we thank you for any feedback in advance that we get. So Bailey, if you could call up the presentation, please. And this will be brief, so meat and potatoes of tonight. Obviously, we'll be talking about capital and the open space this evening. There's a brief agenda laid out on how we'll go. It tracks, next slide, please. It tracks what was sent out to you in a very large PDF form, so you can follow along with all the line items as well as the budgetary or the capital request forms. Next slide, please. This slide prepared by our CFO, Joe, basically shows what our capital improvement fund has looked like over the last few years. This is the 5% down payment that we have had to put year over year for all the debt that we are issuing. Not every form of debt requires a 5%. Most of it does. And this is the spending. And you can see that going from 2018 to present time, we have had quite a bit of a spike there. We'll talk a little bit more about ways we can pare down the capital spending, but it has looked like over the last few years there has been a noticeable increase in capital spending. Next slide, please. Another thing we want to keep a close eye on are interest rates. When interest rates are low, it's a great time to go ahead and borrow money. But when interest rates start to pop up like they are right now, you have to take that into account and be careful about your long-term finances and which projects you choose. This particular graph here shows our bond anticipation notes debt service. These are really our short-term debt, and you can see the spike in interest rates that we've had to deal with over the last year or so. Again, it's just something I wanted to bring to everybody's attention as we go ahead and formulate the finances for the township over the next few years. Just something to keep in mind that interest rates do have an effect on our ability to borrow and the budgets that you approve. Next slide, please. And the last thing I'll talk about is just the deferments, which I have recommended. In each of the spreadsheets, you'll see a line or a column there that talks about or states which is recommended by administration. That's really me. And my thought process about some of the things that I chose to defer are listed here. One is the likelihood of a 2023 start. Some of these projects which I looked at just didn't seem like they were going to happen this year. There's a number of reasons for that. There are timing issues. We have some projects which are still in review with DEP and doesn't seem like they're going to be out of review anytime soon. Also, there's a concern over some estimates on some of these projects. A few years ago, that really wasn't an issue. Estimating was pretty solid, but as we've seen over the last couple of years, both the materials and labor have skyrocketed. It's incredibly volatile, and some of the estimates that we have in hand today may not hold up in a year or two. In fact, we're seeing that on quite a few projects where we're working off of estimates that are just a year or two old, and we're coming back and asking for more money because we can't complete the project in the original budget that was laid out. Third one is a budgetary restrictions, looking for ways to save money, and that means sometimes we have to defer certain purchases or projects to future years. Again, we noticed that there was a spike in capital spending, so we want to go ahead and see if we can rein that in a little bit. And the last thing I want to bring to everyone's attention, I believe I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it here as well. It's been the practice of Maplewood to really make all these decisions around capital during the budget process, the annual budget process. For capital, that is really not necessary. You have every ability to go out in the middle of a year, pass a bond ordinance and issue the debt to go ahead and finance a project should things change. So when I look at some of the projects which I may have recommended for deferment, if the circumstances change, and we realize that the project we thought wasn't going to happen in 2023 actually is going to happen, that doesn't mean you can't do it. You can still go out in the middle of a year and go ahead and issue that, put that bond ordinance in place and issue that debt. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that flexibility that you have. Although it hasn't been the practice here in the past with Maplewood, it's certainly a great tool to use going forward, especially as you're making decision. You might be making a decision on an estimate, and by the time you get to the project, that estimate is 1 year to 2 years old. Again, a couple of years ago, it wasn't that big of a deal, but now with all the volatility, it is quite a big deal. So with that, unless there's any initial questions, we're prepared to go into the meat and potatoes of the proposals and go department by department.
Terrific. And so are we. I want to offer our CFO the opportunity to make any remarks here at the outset, if he so wishes, since he's with us. CFO Joe?
No, I think our administrator has pretty much covered everything that we're looking at, Mayor. I guess just to add a little bit to the ability to do bond ordinances throughout the year. Ultimately, if we do not budget the full amount, which in theory, if we pull this list down and then reduce the amount that's hitting our operating budget, the mechanism would be for the Township Committee to pass an emergency appropriation, which would then create the 5% down payment that statutorily we are allowed to do. And that all that does is say that in 2024, we would raise that amount in the 5% down payment. So that's the mechanism for being able to do any projects at any given time of the year if we did not adequately budget in the beginning part of the year for the 5% down.
Terrific, thank you. Are there any questions for my colleagues at this early stage? Ms. Adams?
Yes, hi. Could I have the CFO sort of explain what he did at our finance committee meeting with regard to the effect of budgeting too much in our capital projects? Because like we said, it's often in our budget hearings over the last 7 years I've been involved. It's often said that, well, it's only $5 on or 5 cents on a dollar or something to include this capital project or this capital project. And you made an explanation at finance committee. I'd like you, if you remember what it was, I'd like you to share about why that's not necessarily a good practice.
So ultimately, when we establish a capital budget and we establish money for a down payment, we go out and do a bond ordinance. The bond ordinance doesn't say that we have to borrow the money. The bond ordinance gives us the ability to go out and borrow the money. And so the reason that CFOs typically get a little nervous when they see multiple bond ordinances going up is when we start to borrow on those bond ordinances, while they don't have a major impact in the particular year that we adopt them and that we use our 5% as a down payment, when we start to borrow that money, it has an impact on multiple years because now we've got this debt service that we have to pay back. Typically, all our bond ordinances are done through notes, which is why you saw the slide that was just looking at debt service from a temporary financing perspective or a note perspective. So, I mean, currently we have $6.6 million in notes. This would be the year that typically we would look to convert those notes into permanent financing and bonds because we retired 2 bonds last year. And so we were able to keep our debt service at some sort of nice level. 2 million came off, 2 million is now coming back on. And so there's not a drastic impact on future budgets. But given our particular circumstances right now and with inflation really kind of monkeying with what the interest rates are, and you can see the spike last year, our note came due last year and it was 0.169% interest. So we paid $89,000 interest on borrowing $8 million worth of money, which is practically unheard of. Now the interest rates are coming in at a rate where when we renew this particular note, which is at $16.6 million, you saw that we're going to wind up paying a significant amount of interest this year. And now we're going to look at bond ordinances that if we borrow that money is going to add to that. So that next year's interest payment on the notes to do this year's projects is going to push us up even further. Now, whether the market stabilizes and we're able to convert this into long-term financing and sell some bonds sometime in June or July, we will soon enough find out, and we'll have those conversations with our financial advisor and our bond counsel to determine if that makes sense for us. But whatever we're doing today, while it has a relatively small impact on a $54 million budget because it's just a 5% down payment, it starts to have a more cumulative effect in future budgets as we start to spend that money. And again, we are just doing a bond ordinance that says we're allowed to borrow the money. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to go through with it. And so that's another way of trying to manage what we're doing over the years. But then as Mr. Schuster pointed out, we're budgeting in 2023 dollars. Now we're finally ready to move forward in 2025. And now we're doing another bond ordinance because 2 years later, everything costs more and what we have in the budget's not enough. So we need to sort of pay attention to how we put this together, not so much for how it's going to impact this year's budget. Right now, we initially had $400,000 for a down payment based on Mr. Schuster's cuts. We got that down to under $300,000. The TC can cut further and get it down to $200,000. So it's a $200,000 impact in the course of a $54 million budget this year. But where we start to see it is when we actually borrow $4 million, and now we got to pay interest on that in 2024. And suddenly, $600,000 worth of interest payments turns into $800,000 worth of interest payments. And that's where we see the effect on future budgets.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Kaloje or Mr. Schuster at this moment? Okay, seeing none, let's dive in and look at things department by department. The first department up tonight is administration. Ms. Burnett, can you help us pulling up that relevant portion?
Yes. Okay, so this is going to have a good chunk of our capital requests on it. The first line for administration is right up here at the top. That's going to be for parking meter upgrades, which I'm going to speak about. The requested amount is $24,000. So a little bit of background. I'm sure plenty of folks are familiar with the fact that we've had some issues with our current parking meters in the commuter lots. There have been issues with buttons breaking, batteries going out, issues with the screens being broken, and with the integration of the app technology that allows users to access the meter and then also allows our parking enforcement officers to issue tickets and provide enforcement. So one of our primary challenges with our current vendor is that they're actually not based on the East Coast, they're based on the West Coast. And so by the time they're in office on any given day, our morning rush hour is well over. And so we're not able to address the issues in a timely manner. By the time they respond, it's the afternoon, and pretty much any potential revenue for that morning is lost. Either people weren't able to pay for their parking or we weren't able to issue tickets for enforcement. And it basically becomes on those days free parking. Some other issues that we've had are that because they're based on the West Coast, they ship all of their equipment for repairs from the West Coast and they don't provide on-site repairs for us. So we're required to have our DPW staff perform the repairs on their broken equipment. And we're also paying higher shipping costs to get that equipment sent from California to New Jersey. So it's become a bit of a liability in terms of like losing revenue, costing extra money for repairs, and then also taking up additional time on behalf of our staff because we essentially manage the parking meters and any needed repairs, as opposed to having our parking meter provider do so, even though we pay them monthly to handle our parking meters. So my recommendation here was to switch to a parking provider that is based in New Jersey and that can provide on-site support and repairs with if needed. The new parking meters, we would have to purchase new meters, and that is about 2/3 of this request. And then the other third is that once we set it up, those parking meters come with the first year of enforcement and e-permitting and all of that, as well as training and a 1-year warranty. But my recommendation here is to have that $24 to get 2 new meters in, one that are touchscreens so we don't have the issues with the physical aspects of the meters that have happened in the past with buttons freezing or being easily vandalized. These are also solar powered meters, so that'll be like a nice green component to it. But really the primary reason is to have that local support and people who can come out and perform repairs and provide us with the support that we're paying for on an easier basis and who can be more responsive to our needs.
You're muted.
Thank you. I said that was a great explanation and context for this request. Thank you, Ms. Barnett. And for the public's edification, the new company that's locally based in New Jersey is?
So they are an affiliate of Flowbird, but they're called Devo and Associates LLC. So the meters that we have are going to be Flowbird meters, which are the same ones that are used in New York City, Hoboken. So folks might already be familiar with them, but Devo and Associates is the New Jersey company that actually administers the services with them. So that would be who we'd be working with.
Terrific. Thank you for that. And that is the only request that we have in terms of capital from administration. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
So any discussion about this request? No discussion. All right, we're going to move on from that request and dive into a much bigger department with many requests, community services.
And Mayor, before you move to community services, you'll note that there were 2 items under the clerk. They were small items, which we removed and moved over to the operating budget as they didn't really fit in capital, but those items will be purchased there.
Yep. Thank you for that. Okay, community services. I know we have our community services director as well.
Can I ask that we put up the explanation sheet for each of these accounts?
Sure.
You have that. It's part of that document. Okay.
Yes, just one moment. Sorry, they're not in the same order on this document, so I'm just scrolling down to community services, but I'll pull those up if community services director Mancuso wants to go in and start.
Okay, sure. I can just go down the list starting in the beginning, which begins with the Woodland Stage curtain. And that is, once we had some vendors come out and take a look at the curtain, it's very old and it's been treated a lot of times with fire retardant treatment. So it's got staining and it's definitely had a long life. And upon having vendors come out to take a look at it, it was recommended to really redo the hardware, the tracking pipes, pulleys, the sash cords, and kind of install all new hardware back there on the ceiling. And this would include the curtains also. So it's a 23 to 25 ounce material, depending on color availability, to replace it to the quality that it is right now, like the thickness, and just get it basically safer and current and replaced, because cleaning it or anything like that is no longer an option. It's probably original and it's just outlived its life expectancy.
It sure has, and it looks pretty terrible, especially recently, because it has really started to change colors in certain parts.
It has, it's getting like a tie-dye effect. And the vendor said maybe that's from the fire retardant that's been sprayed like just time after time, which we do and get it inspected all the time. That it's just
Right. So any discussion about this item? Okay, we'll move on to the next item.
all right. Do you have the spotlight next, or do you go to the tables?
You've got the tables here. Let's do the tables.
Okay. Perfect. This is for another heavily used building that we have, the DeHart Community Center, and it is for replacement of their very old round tables, rectangular tables, and also racks for both. So this pricing is for 12 rectangle, 12 round, and then 2 rectangle table carts and 2 round table carts. So the tables that are in DeHart, I'm sure you've all attended events or had to lug them, are the old school tables that are not friendly for, building attendants or anybody else. They're the old school. They've had a lot of good times on them with kids camp over probably 20 to 30 years. So this was just to, replace, and the building is used, it's booked by community groups and private renters pretty much every day. There's a lot of bookings twice a day. So aside from kids camp, this is used by neighborhood groups, Girl Scouts, and a lot of users would take advantage of having a fresher appearance and a lighter table to put away and take out every time.
Great, thank you. Any discussion about this item?
Mayor, can I just ask a process question? Are we just getting information tonight, or are we going to be discussing these items?
I think we should discuss these items. We don't have to
So-
make a decision necessarily, but we should discuss the items.
So we spent a lot of time just talking about tables. If there's nobody who opposes it, why don't we just say, are we okay with it, and move on? I guess, are you
Well, that's
trying
why
to
I'm
get us to
asking.
that point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking if there's any discussion. If there isn't, we're moving on. Do you suggest an alternate process?
Okay, no, I guess, okay, no, I'm good,
Or,
I'm good. I mean, I'm ready to make decisions on these things, I guess. I don't know if that's how you,
yeah, I'm ready to make decisions too, but I think the public also needs to see what we're asking for and what the context of those decisions are. I mean, we could do this meeting in 15 minutes, right? We have all looked at this, we've done our homework, we've prepared, we've had discussions in subcommittees, and we could just talk about the hot topics, but the public is not going to have that context. So while we're here, I think we should go item by item, and if there's no discussion, we'll keep moving on. Anybody else disagree? Okay, let's move on.
Okay. The next request is Memorial Park basketball and tennis court lighting replacement. So this is also very antiquated over at Memorial Park. This cost includes new lighting with LED technology, so that will reduce light spill and glare by 50% or more if we update with the latest technology. Memorial Park's a popular destination for active recreation, our own recreation programs, which we have countless, kids clinics, lessons, camps, adult lessons, and then for the neighborhood and anybody around to just, go play tennis. So this lighting is for both courts, which we do get a lot of complaints about the lighting being inadequate. It's not full coverage. We get a lot of safety concerns with that. The bulbs are very, very old, hard to find. Offering the updated lighting would be less light spill, and then the reduction of energy and maintenance costs would be 50 to 85%, which is typical with this sort of upgrade from what we have to where we would go with this. This is with product assurance and warranty program, eliminating 100% of our maintenance for 10 years, which it's a lot to maintain the bulbs. Of course, we have to get cherry pickers out there and have either outside vendors or DPW, depending on what goes wrong with the lights. And then this would be control link, upgraded lighting that we could do for more phones or computers, which currently it's like an old school timer in the basement of the Civic House. So it would be a full upgrade, which would be better for the environment and offer more safety.
Great, thank you. And I see that this is not recommended for this budget.
That's correct, and I hate using the term "not recommended." I recommend it for a deferment. It doesn't mean that I don't agree with the project or don't think there's value in it. But in looking at the high cost and some of the other decisions that we had to make, I felt this one was something that could be deferred.
Thank you. Any discussion about it?
Yeah, I would just add that OSTF also recommended not funding this year, even though everybody agreed on the environmental aspects and it's old and all that. It wasn't something they felt was a priority either.
And just to clarify that, I don't know if I can talk in this part or not, but
Of course.
is this exactly the same proposal? It's just a different number than was submitted to Open Space?
Yeah, this is the same thing we discussed.
It's the same thing. It's not the resurfacing, Gary. It's
Oh, no. I know it's lighting. There were two numbers. We got a request for 300.
For 300.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to make sure this was the same project.
It's the same project, but it seems like OSTF was presented with a different number than the one we're looking at 265. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or discussion about this topic?
I have one question. Is there, and maybe this is for Paul Kittner, is there anything that we have to dig up in order to put new lighting in that would make sense in doing the courts and the lighting at one time?
We did ask that at OSTF. Is Paul here or is he somewhere?
Hi, everybody. I'm here. Paul Kittner, Township Engineer and Director of Public Works. Typically with the lighting, the conduits go on the outside and they backfeed the lights themselves. So they're not going to go into the courts themselves. They're going to go around the perimeter of the courts. So the answer is you can reconstruct it with the new lighting in place. It's just the contractor has to take a little more care and be more careful when they do the work, knowing that the conduits are there. It can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Another comment we had at Open Space was if it's possible, because of the cost, and I don't know if it's justifiable or not, but possibly consider phasing it in, doing either tennis courts first and basketball second, or basketball first and tennis courts later. If that helps. I have no idea if that helps the financial impact or not.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Are we all okay with deferment on this one? Any further discussion? Okay, moving on to additional funding for the spray park, at least. Nope. Not on this side. Okay, boarding park tennis.
Okay, yeah, the spray park's not gonna have a form, just it's not gonna be in that packet.
Okay,
So I don't know if you want to talk about it now or at the
about
end.
this. Let's talk about it as it shows up here.
You mean to go into board and park? Tennis,
Please.
okay.
Please.
Board and park tennis court resurfacing. It's one court there in the board and park neighborhood, and that cost is $68,500 because it's actually beyond a resurfacing, but a repaving. It would include pressure washer, installing the armor crack on the cracks and the acrylic resurfacer, installing the two-tone tennis court surface. And we had the idea to put alternate color pickleball lines also on this court. It would be new nets and posts included in the project. So due to the current condition of it, that's why it was recommended reconstruction and repaving. The fence is okay, the fence can stay, and then everything else will basically be new.
This was recommended for funding through OSTF, just so you know.
Yes.
You're muted, Mayor.
Damn. Any further discussion about this item? Okay, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, next is the shade structure at DeHart at the playground area. This is going to be our fourth summer without a large mature oak that used to be right in the middle of the playground area and offered shade. It had to be removed, due to safety concerns. So this price is for a rectangular shade system, 25 by 30 with a 12-foot eave and in-ground columns. So it'll offer some shade. We can have different stations there. It could be used, of course, not only at camp, but now that we have basketball being played over there, there's tennis courts and just really anybody, looking to get some respite from the sun. It's just the number one concern, is sun safety in the summertime over and on that playground side of the building. So this is all-inclusive pricing. And then that we, offer some coverage. Of course, we have the building during camp, but it would give us a station, couple groups to eat, or, other groups when they're playing basketball or anything else to have a break from the sun.
Thank you, Ms. Miskuzzo. This is something that we've been looking to do for quite some time, and I understand that OSTF also approved this request. Is that correct, Mr. Nelson?
That is correct. We like this design better than the one we were shown a couple years ago, so that was part of it. I think the other thing we noted that night was that we would still prefer to have trees planted around there so that in time they could provide the shade as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Any further discussion about this? Great, we'll move on.
Okay, next is Memorial Park Tennis Court repaving. There are 3 tennis courts over at Memorial Park. They're very heavily used. This is to do similarly what I just said over at Borden, pressure washing, armor crack repair, the acrylic resurfacer, and repainting. So this would make things more playable and safe. We have had some issues on that court with like dipping and puddling. So in an effort to keep things safe, this was the quote. There's actually over 1,200 linear feet of cracking on the courts right now. So once they were looked at, it was recommended repaving on that and that park as well.
Yes, and the courts are a mess and they've gotten worse, and we've had the big storms that made it worse, and we get complaints about those courts all the time. Any discussion about this item?
Will the flooding be solved with this?
Well, that's I'm not the one to give you the answer, Vic.
I wasn't. I was asking Mr. Kittner, actually.
That was a big part of the discussion, and whether it's repaving or resurfacing, and which job does this really have to be?
So I think in this work, the low spots that collect, like bird bath areas, that will be eliminated. But when you say flooding, the whole area is going to be in a flood zone. So, it's absolutely prone to periodic flooding based on storm events in the future.
But I guess I wasn't thinking of the river coming up. I was just thinking of rain. We get a lot of puddling and then it settles in the corner there when it rains.
Yes.
Just going to resolve any of that?
Yes, that doing this work will eliminate the bird baths that you see. That is a big nuisance for everybody. Yes.
I'm seeing more of like the, big lake. Well, the big lakes, like you know what I'm talking about? It gets stuck, not on so much on the court, but in the corner by the fence.
Well, Melissa, this includes the resurfacing. So is this milling this off, or is this patching this or adding to it?
Yeah, this is milling, and I think that
Okay.
that corner is improved a lot since as bad as it used to be.
Okay, so if you're milling the surface and you're putting down a new surface, you have an opportunity to eliminate all those. If you get a good contractor, it can be eliminated. If you get an average contractor, it can still be present, unfortunately, but we will do our best to eliminate all of it.
Thank you. And Ms. Mancuso, once these are resurfaced and repaved and restriped, are you also looking at adding the pickleball lines to these as we did over in Walter?
I was not planning on it in Memorial just because it's our learning courts for all of our youth lessons, and most of our serious players play there too. So we were leaving this tennis specific for that purpose.
Are you planning accordingly elsewhere other than Walter for pickleball?
Borden, we are planning for pickle.
Okay, so when those get done, people will be able to also reserve for pickleball.
Yes.
Okay, great. We get that request a lot too. In fact, I just got an email from someone about it. They must be watching us on YouTube. Hello out there. Okay, we'll move on.
I think this one was also recommended by OSTF to fund, just.
It was, and for this 150, whether it's remilling, pulling up, resurfacing, whatever it comes to. The only other concern we had at that committee was, this is going to knock out 3 of the most heavily used courts in town, and there won't be very many options for people. So be prepared.
Yeah, the timing would be critical to reduce closure as much as possible.
Okay, let's keep this going. Let's keep it going. Next item.
See, we're onto the pool in the blue on the spreadsheet, and it's the shade structure at the pool. This is a replacement of a structure that was there. So you may have received some complaints. It got kind of twisted up in a storm, and then the post got taken down when we were redoing the filtration project. So we've made do without it, but there were a lot of complaints. So we're looking to bring it back. So this is the same shade structure that was there. It's 18 by 24 by 8. Up on the upper deck, there's other shade structures there now. And this one used to be centered between the two that are still remaining.
Great. And that was also recommended by administration not to be deferred for this budget. Any discussion about it?
I guess I just am a little, why weren't the footings put back after the filtration? That was a really expensive project. So why wasn't it restored then? Either Paul or Missy.
Yeah, I don't know, Paul, if you remember, it was over kind of by the training pool, and to get access, they had to take out even just the whole footing where it was connected to the decking. So in between all that, when the awning part got destroyed, it just kind of didn't get replaced or reinserted or.
Yeah, I don't know the exact reason. I think the footing was damaged, and the studs that were coming through the concrete were damaged. But I think what happened was, at the time, to facilitate the construction and keep it ongoing, they simply cut it clean so it wasn't a trip hazard. But, you know, for whatever reason, it was not reinstalled. I don't know if the condition of the older one was, you know, was in poor shape or not, but for
It's just
whatever-
frustrating because that was a hugely expensive project and now here's another 10 grand. So I'm just saying.
Right. Let's move on to the other pool covers. Requested and recommended.
Okay, these are for pool covers for the dive tank and the training pool. Safety covers made of super dense mesh to replace those two. This is inclusive of installation, and they both were last replaced in 2000, so they've outlived their expectancy. They're, you know, taped and patched in multiple locations. So in order to keep the pools clean and safe in the off season, we're looking to replace those two this year.
Thank you. This is also recommended by administration. I'll move on unless there's an objection. Okay, moving on to the wheelchairs and lift chairs.
Okay, yeah, the lift wheelchairs were also very outdated. We had been replacing costly batteries the past probably 3 seasons to try to keep them going. We've had electricians out and they're no longer salvageable, you know, at all. We've had, of course, members and guests, you know, in need of in-water therapy, and we need the facility to be accessible and ADA compliant. So this price of $19,000 is for 2, one at the main pool and one at the training pool.
Yep, also not controversial and make our pool safer and more inclusive. Unless there's an objection, we're going to move on to a bigger ask, the resurfacing of the pool at $1 million.
Yes, so this is also a long time coming, needing to resurface the pools at the facility with the everything except the baby or splash pool, because we've had that one done, so that is not needed, and that's a much smaller job. So this is resurfacing for the competition main pool, the dive tank, and the training pool. The training pool has multiple patches right now in it, so this is needed to keep everything safe, to keep the facility clean. The chemical disbursement should be helped out with having new surfacing. When the pool is over age, they become like pitted, rough. Some people, we call it pool toe, but it gets like a little bit crazy in the main pool right now if you've been in there. And with excessive chemical use and sun damage, they're rough to the touch and they start, you know, pitting and sinking. And so this is just needed for our 3 pools.
And when was it last done? When was it last done? Do you remember? Was it before you?
It was definitely before me. Yeah, we've only done the baby pool since I've been here because the kids really get their toes on, you know, the little kids will cut their toes when it gets all rough. So it's just a big ticket item that we, you know, it's been delayed or put off, or there's no time, or other projects happening. But I think now is the time to do it, even if we don't do the work this year because we're, you know, too close to the season. With the pool being it, and Mr. Kaloja can chime in, trying to save some money on a bond note if the pool's self-liquidating this year and make it more cost effective to plan on this project now.
So what is the expectation of life for this resurfacing? Because this is like almost the same amount as our entire road program. It just seems like a lot of money, and I guess I'd like some understanding as to why it's so expensive.
Well, we had a consultant provide the budget cost estimate. So this is like high pressure water blasting to everything, removing and disposing of all the existing tiles, lane lines, step edges, and preparing them all for plastering, acid washing, and applying the Diamond Bright or crystalline court plaster all over it on all of them. Summit just did this, I think, like a year ago, and I saw theirs. And I was impressed how quickly they actually got it done the way they planned it all out. And this also has in it an estimate for general contractor cost to to bid the project, coordinate subcontractors, provide necessary scheduling to ensure proper curing for a period of 2 to 3 weeks following the plaster application. So that's inclusive of this and the estimate for all 3 pools.
And what is the life expectancy? Like, when would we have to do this again? Do you know?
I can ask them and get back to you. I mean, I don't think the dive tank has been done in like 20, 30 years. It's been just because nobody touches the bottom, but now it's like there's staining right now. You could see in the main pool in the 6-foot area. I mean, it's basically unrecoverable. I mean, we've scrubbed and we've acid washed, and it's just brown down there from any algae that builds up. So it makes for a more inviting pool too when it's like blue.
Sure. And you stated already that in light of where we are so close to opening the pool again, this is not likely to be done this year, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Other discussion about this? Mr. DeLuca, Ms. Kripe, Ms. Engel, anyone?
Yeah, how long what's the duration of work for this? How many months?
I think 3. I know Summit had it really choreographed where they got it done in like 12 weeks. But that's basically the plan is to start right after Labor Day. You know, it's like a September start, like not before this season.
No, I understand not before the season, but for 3 months, you wouldn't be able to start. You'd have to start now for next year. I mean, I would assume this work is weather dependent also, right?
Right.
So why would it not be done this year? I mean, I don't think you're going to do it. Are you talking about doing it next October, next September, or this September?
This September, but just after the season.
Okay, so this is an expenditure that would happen in 2023.
Yes.
Okay, because I thought you said you were putting it off to next year, and maybe you're defining years as swim years.
I'm thinking spring, yeah.
Okay, but calendar years, you think this work would get done right after, I guess the last event there is the employee picnic, correct?
Yeah.
And it would go, if that would be September, its work would probably go into December.
Into
Then
December, yeah.
90 days.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there stop points? Because that's kind of tight, I think. I mean, not that we got snow this year. I'm not expecting, well, I'm kind of expecting or hoping for weather changes. But if there came to be a point, say it started to snow, is there a hard place where they could stop and restart the project without damaging what's already been put in place? I just worry if we're spending all this money and we can't finish it in that 12-week period, if we're going to have to re-up that 12-week come February, March 2024 and do it all over again.
Right. No, I think that they're prepared for bad weather. You know, I don't know if they cover up the job site or just cancel the work for, you know, those days, like when they see the forecasts. But I think they're prepared for that.
Mr. Kittner, can you answer that question? Do you have any context?
Thank you, Mayor. I think, Melissa, what you indicated, Ms. Mancuso, is that the duration of the work is 3 months, give or take 3 to 4 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's with allowing in for the bad weather, you know, days.
And what's the coldest you could actually apply this material? Do you know? I mean, is this something they could do in December?
I think they finished in Summit in like November, because they just had it all planned out accordingly once it was awarded to get moving rapidly in September.
I mean, look, if we awarded the work in advance and we actually had the contractor on board and we put it in the contract so that, you know, there was a 3.5 or 3 month completion time, then we probably could get it done. And honestly, the weather in December has been very mild because of climate change. So it's quite possible that this could be done at the end of the year if the money was available.
I have a question. We're going to have weather problems in any time that we do it, whether it's going to be September, September to December or starting in like February or March. And I would rather do it after this season before next season than have to start next season late because we've been waiting for the weather. Because I feel like the past few years it's been snowing through March. And so then we're going to get stuck without a pool opening because we're still resurfacing, which I think would be bad.
Yeah, we don't want to delay an opening.
Right. So how does everyone feel about approving this? It has been recommended by administration, but how does the governing body feel about it?
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, if I could just add to the conversation,
Sure.
and it looks like I've got unstable internet, so I apologize, and I'll try to be quick. Part of the reason that we have these projects on is because the pool is self-liquidating this year. So by approving these projects in this year, the pool doesn't have to come up with 5% as a down payment. We could fully fund 100% of whatever projects we're doing for the pool. If we put this into a bond ordinance this year and chose not to move forward, we obviously wouldn't borrow any money to do so. And so it would be sort of a no harm, no foul type of situation. And if we chose to do the project in 2024 or 2025, the money would be there without the requirement of having to come up with $50,000 to resurface this pool. So for that reason, it's sort of why it's still on the list. This I based on projections, I don't think the pool will be self-liquidating in 2024, which means any pool projects we're going to do starting next year, we will have to come up with the 5%. Ultimately, if we didn't move forward with the project, we would just cancel by resolution and eliminate it from a bond ordinance that was passed 2 years ago. So I think that part of it needs to sort of be considered when looking at the pool requests, because right now, any pool requests aren't going to affect the pool's operating budget.
Understood. And I think that's important context. I mean, look, it's a hefty price tag. As Ms. Adams said, this is as much as our entire road program. Everyone uses the roads every single day, and the roads are a mess out there. We hear about that constantly throughout the year. But this also needs to be done. And maybe this is the year to make an appropriation for it. So I'm a yes. Others?
I'm a yes. I'm thinking that this is not enough money. Is this account for a construction manager? I mean, look, that filtration system project, we didn't manage that from a construction process very well.
She said, yes, it includes the construction.
Okay, I
Yeah,
didn't hear her.
Yeah, there's 250 in there for that.
I'm a yes.
Okay. Ms. Adams?
Yeah, although as I said before, our roads are indeed a big mess, and we're always struggling to do that infrastructure. And like you said, Mayor, that's used by everybody. The pool is not. So it's a hard decision for me. So if we have 3 votes,
Ms. Engel?
I'm a yes.
Ms. Cright?
I'm a yes, but I really we really need to look into also alternative opportunities for folks who cannot afford the pool. We can't continue to just keep pumping funds into this utility that got limited usage.
Yeah, we're talking about that too. Yeah, and we're having those discussions as well. So, there is something that's coming up here again, folks, and I hate to put people on the spot. This is not personal or disrespectful. I see that community services and engineering DPW are not communicating. This is a big project. This is going to require you all to coordinate. And I'm getting the sense from the questions being asked. And Ms. Mancuso, did you say it was 3 months? Like you guys need to coordinate this stuff. This is important. You got to talk to each other constantly. And whatever is prohibiting that, it needs to be removed. So Mr. Schuster, please coordinate accordingly. These are big projects. And while Ms. Mancuso is the aquatics professional, and she does know what she's talking about when it relates to the pool, once we get into construction and all of that stuff, Mr. Kittner, who's an engineer and very familiar with construction, needs to be part of the process. Mr. DeLuca mentioned the filtration system, and that was a mess because in part, not totally, in part because of the lack of coordination between departments. So please get on the phone, get on an email, do what you got to do, talk to each other, and please coordinate this stuff. Okay. Thumbs up.
Yes.
Thumbs up. Great. All right. We're going to move on to the next topic. And where are we now? Did we get through all the pool stuff? And all the community services stuff, Ms. Mancuso?
We did, there's not a form for the spray park if we were discussing the spray park. That was
Yeah, let's talk about the spray park. Let's end there. Yes, there isn't a form because you're not introducing the project. The project has been introduced at least 2 budget cycles already now. And we've had fulsome discussion about it internally and externally with the community. What you were asking for was an additional appropriation to what we had already set aside. Mr. Schuster, can you walk us through where we are here now in terms of what we had set aside, what was requested, and your reasoning there?
Sure, Mayor. If you recall, I sent an email out on February 3rd, going over all the steps that were taken. There is $550,000 of funding approved through OSTF. There has been to date $108,000 of pre-construction costs incurred. We anticipate more about $90,000 to be incurred for oversight during construction, and approximately $855,000 for the actual construction, for a total estimated project cost of slightly over $1 million. This comes from the latest estimate we have from our consultant that's been working with us on this project. The funding deficit as it stands right now, if that estimate is accurate, is slightly over $500,000. So we have a ways to go to meet any the actual funding requirement there. I will note that the bids are out right now and scheduled to be open on March 2nd, I believe. At that point, we'll actually have hard numbers to have a better discussion on this. My recommendation was to remove this for the time being in absence of a discussion and having those hard numbers. When I look, and I've had the opportunity to work with and have spray parks in communities that I've managed. They are wildly popular. There's no doubt about it. The people love those spray parks. They're heavily used. However, when I saw the price going up to $1 million, it gave me pause. Especially since I wasn't here for the original conversations about what the original thought was on how much this was going to cost. So I think it's worthy of extra discussion, and that's why I did remove it from my recommendation. I certainly understand the equity issues involved in having this versus the pool, and I certainly understand the popularity that the resource would be. So I'm perfectly comfortable in doing whatever the committee would like to do, but those are the reasons why I decided to not recommend it at this point. My recommendation could change once those hard numbers come in and we see what the actual bids are.
So what is the plan? Obviously, we haven't seen the numbers. We got to look at the numbers, and we possibly can't decide this right here, right now, but is the idea that we're putting this off until next year, hoping that construction costs will come down from the ridiculous place that there are now, or what? Or do we need to start all over with a new consultant? I mean, what is the long-term goal here? Because it seems like this project is slowly dying.
Yeah, I don't I don't have a crystal ball, and I wish I could say that the market will be more favorable to us next year in terms of labor and materials. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. I can say, and Mr. Kittner can correct me if I'm wrong, that the work that's been done so far with the design is not going to be in vain. If you decide to defer this for a year or two, that work would still be valid. Just we would hope that the prices would come in a little bit more favorable.
Absolutely. The design is complete. There's a full plan set and specification. The township, if you didn't get preferred pricing, you could shelve it and come back to it a year or two from now. Just make some minor tweaks and upgrades on the plans and specs and put it back out on the street.
Is there any expectation that are we just basing our expectation that it's going to be so much more on Collier's, like an engineer who is saying that?
Yeah, correct. We have no other information. It's just 100%, which is why I'm recommending waiting until the second when the bids are open and we have hard numbers.
Yeah, I think Mr. Schuster's idea is the right one. Let's see what the real costs are. These numbers are based on an engineer's estimate. And what I've seen in this climate is, pricing that's all over the place. So let's see where the bids come in at, and hope, we certainly can hope for the best.
Yeah, that's where I would be.
I agree with that approach too. I think that's wise. Any other discussion? Angle?
Can I just say one thing on this? My concern is that we've been talking about this, I think, since 2020, and we had a lot of community involvement and community engagement, surveys, meetings. I covered this for the Village Green in 2021 when it was moved forward. And so the fact that we're saying that, not this year, maybe not next year, maybe 2 years from now is a little, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable because this has so much support in the community. And I just want to figure out a way that we do have some funding for it to move forward. We talked about kicking in some NPP grant money possibly toward it. And I just feel like I don't want to see this project just linger and always be pushed off because it's already been pushed off for 3 years.
Right. I mean, I would say, in all honesty, it wasn't necessarily pushed off. We were having more discussions. The design needed to be adjusted. And I don't think that the narrative isn't that we're shelving this and we're not doing it. The narrative is we are interested in doing this, but the number that we're looking at here in terms of making an appropriation it may not be accurate at all because we haven't gone out to bid to see what those numbers would actually be. We're only getting one person's opinion on this. Do I understand that correctly?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to see this project go forward too. I was a big champion of it also. And I agree that, a lot of goodwill was built out there in the community for this. And we should have this. It's really, really important for all the reasons we've discussed many times before. But, we also have to make decisions based on actual fact and data. And we don't have that right now. All we have is some engineers possibly way inflated estimates. We do not have anything more than that. And we could decide once we get those numbers in the coming months, later in the year. Also, the other part of the narrative for the public is we do have money set aside for this project, and we're not touching that money. We have set aside the amount that was presented to us as the original estimate to get this started. That has significantly changed, and the appropriation request to bring it to what this person is saying should be at $1 million is being at the moment deferred until we have better information about whether or not we need an additional appropriation of $300,000. Right?
Right.
Thank you for clarifying.
I appreciate the clarification. Also, I would like to stress that before we actually allocate additional funding, again, not to harp on the pool, but this same community that has energy behind it, wanting the spray park, would take it as a complete insult, a smack in the face, if we continue to pump money into the pool. And this sits on the table, continues to sit for another 2, possibly 3 years. So long as the the idea behind our tabling this is that it's the top of the list of priorities for the next round of things, then I'm okay with it. But if we go for another 2 years, we can't justify it. We can't justify any additional expenses in lieu also of the fact that we've got potholes all over the place. We just can't keep pumping money into an endless pool, literally, and expect people to be okay with it.
Right. And I think you're right. And I think we all agree with that. There's no objection. Again, our messaging is really important. We're not tabling it. We're temporarily at this moment in time deferring the additional appropriation request until we have better information about how much money we need to get it done, knowing that we have a significant amount of money set aside to get it done, and knowing that we have a design in place that we're all comfortable with, including the community, ready to go.
So I'm sorry, but I don't agree with that. And Ms. Barnett, can you get rid of the share so we can see each other? Thank you. I don't understand. I really don't understand the theory of waiting. I understand waiting till March 2nd, but shouldn't we say tonight, let's assume that the engineer's right, that it's going to cost $800,000 and the whole thing's going to cost $1 million. That's the number. And if we're comfortable, are we saying we're going to allocate enough money this year to fill the gap? If it comes in less than $1 million, that's terrific. But shouldn't we be on record? I mean, I don't understand, when are we pushing it off to? If we push it off for a year, I don't see how it's going to come in any cheaper. And pushing it off for 2 years is an insult. And if we're not going to do it, then let's free up the $500,000 that we allocated for it for other very worthy projects that are sitting on hold.
Right.
I think we have to make a decision. I'm in favor of allocating money in this year's budget to make the spray park happen.
Yes.
And you know, we don't have to put an exact number tonight, but I think we have to come out of this meeting whether we're in favor of that or not.
I think we are.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't hear
I'm in
that.
favor.
I don't hear that.
No, we were saying table it for another year. I'm actually with Vic on this. If we can move forward and say yes, and we will get the money, then let's do this. We can't continue to wait. It's just going to keep going. When is it going to stop?
Yeah.
I agree. I was okay with waiting until we get more bids to see what it's going to be, but I also would like to put money toward the spray park this year.
See, and I'm obviously in favor of the spray park, but I do think we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's in 2 years, it's literally costing twice as much to our interim administrators. Surprise, having had experience in this. And I mean, if I had to build something in my house, or if one of our residents was spending money on something and they projected this amount and a year later it's double, they would think twice about it. It wouldn't have anything to do with whether or not they wanted to do it. But, you know, we have a fiduciary responsibility. And I think I'd love $1 million. I'd like to pave every road, and I'd like to line every pool, and I'd like to resurface everything. But I don't think anybody should be shamed into asking for more questions about it or worrying about the fact that it might come in even more. And then we're going to have the same discussion with, well, we can't push it off because now it's 1.2 million. At some point, doesn't it because the return on the investment have some sort of conversation? So I'd like to wait to see some hard numbers on it to see where we are, even though I'm in favor of doing the project. That doesn't mean I'm, you know, insulting anybody. I would even consider pushing off the pool resurfacing and putting some of that money toward this. But to just say yes or no, and you can't even consider anything else just because you don't want, you know, I just think that's unfair and not being, you know, fair to the whole community and just thinking this through.
I mean, it makes sense as well, but at the same time, haven't we already done that? We're realists. Costs go up. That's what they do. Things don't go cheaper as the years pass.
Yeah.
So it's gonna go up. So why are we delaying? It's gonna go up. We already know the answer to this. Maybe it's not 800,000 if we go back and talk to the professionals and everything, and Paul ends up finding out that his numbers were a little higher than it was. But hey, you know, at least he was aiming the same direction that the trajectory is telling us. It's going to be more expensive. So what's the point of waiting?
Because I don't know the reason for the increase right now. And if the increase is supply chain and the supply chain issue is going to be remediating itself in a year, and then this would save us all that money, you know, I just don't know the reason. And I hope the engineer is wrong, but it might be even worse, it might be better, and there might be a reason to be reasonable and about the time that we could put it off to if it's going to save us a couple $100,000. That's all. To double it in 2 years is.
You're just making up numbers. How did you come up with saving you a couple $100,000? You're just
Okay.
guessing. We're all just guessing, right?
We're all just guessing. That's why I'm saying.
But we have an engineer's recommendation.
Yeah, an engineer, right.
Right. And so we know what the number is going to be. So it could be even higher, and we could revisit it. But to say now that we're going to table it, I think is wrong. We ought to say whether we're going to be in favor of it or not. We'll see what the bids come in next week, and we'll make some adjustment.
Okay, so if we were making a motion, is the motion that we're all in favor of making an appropriation in this year's budget, the amount to be determined, or are we saying we are agreeing to the $300,000 to be adjusted if necessary and according to the numbers when we find them out?
My vote's the second.
I would make the motion that we reject the recommendation of the administration, and we put the 300,000 back in there so that we know that it's a placeholder and we have a number. And then that can be matched with the bids that come in next Thursday. And then we can make a decision at that point.
Okay, I'll second that. I'll support that. Ms. Engel,
Yes.
Ms. Craig,
Yes.
Ms. Adams.
Yeah, I don't know, and it doesn't matter, right? So.
No, it does, and you should go on the record, Ms. Adams. It's your duty
Well,
to.
I mean, we're not taking a vote on it. I mean, the other option of postponing the resurfacing the pool is like nothing else is considered. So if I'm ranking this, I'd rather not fund a double cost of something of a project at this point.
Right, but Ms. Adams, you owe the public.
I'm telling you what, so my vote would be no on this one right now.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you.
My vote is yes.
Yeah, I think we have.
No.
Yeah, okay, 4-1. All right, good discussion on that. Very good discussion. Where are we now? I lost track.
Now I think you can move on to DPW.
DPW, yeah.
All right. Mr. Kittner, are you ready for that?
Yes, Mayor.
Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your time. So 2301 is vehicle and equipment purchases. Obviously, the vehicles are the tools that we use to get our work done. It's, dealing with, storm events, snow, leaves. Everything that we do, we use equipment and tools at DPW. So we had a master list here that we put together. This was a wish list, and the original list totaled 1.48 million. And talking with administration and our finance department, our CFO, we've been able to whittle that request down significantly. So the request that's before you, I think safely, there's a slight difference in our numbers that is on the spreadsheet that was listed here, that was provided in the packets. I would say a high priority number is $823,000, and I'll explain how we got that. Basically, it's a series of pickup trucks, mason dumps, it's a bucket and chipper truck. It's a Ford Explorer hybrid vehicle, a light tower, a Groundmaster lawnmower for the grass clippings that we do, and a Bandit tree chipper. So the ones we have are old and they need replacing. So it's a series of trucks and vehicles that enable us to do our work. The High Ranger for $300,000 would extend to 75 feet. And it would also have a chipper capacity in the back combined, so that instead of taking 2 trucks out, we're taking 1. So it'd make our operations a little more efficient. So do you want me to go into any more detail on this? Or does anyone have any questions on that?
I'm muted again. So you're saying that your number is 823 with reduction. Our number that we have from administration is 803.
Correct.
Mr. Schuster?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the reason for that, but obviously we'll correct it.
Okay, Mr. Kittner, so what is the answer? The $20,000 is for what?
Again, I could go through it, Mayor. It's a bucket and chipper truck for $300,000. It's 2 F450 Mason dump bodies with snowplow and accessories, 2 of them at $85,000 a piece, and that's $170,000. It's an F350 pickup 4x4 with dump insert lift for refuse recycling that helps our garbage and recycling for $80,000. It's an F450 utility body truck 4x4 at $75,000. It's an F250 pickup 4x4 with snowplow at $50,000. It's a Ford Explorer hybrid vehicle at $41,000. It's a light tower for $12,000. It's a Groundmaster 3200 four-wheel drive at $30,000, and it's a Bandit tree chipper at $65,000. Sorry. Those are the items. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is, because I think there's some unit price changes that we revise based on our supplier and the increases in cost that we've been experiencing. So we accounted for that, and I think that's why there's a difference in the monies, why ours is higher.
Okay, so we can adjust that. Any discussion about this item?
The only thing I would say is there is some money in the inflation reduction package to buy some of these large trucks electric. So let's keep an eye on it. I'm in favor of this. But let's just keep an eye on it. And I believe you mentioned the Ford Explorer is a hybrid. If we can take a look at that, maybe being all electric too. But I'm in favor of the recommendation.
We'll certainly look at that. Thank you.
Ms. Adams, you had your hand up, I think, or no? Oh, okay. Any other discussion? All right, we'll move on to the next item, Mr. Kittner.
Thank you, Mayor. 2302 is buildings and grounds, and this is another one that we actually worked with administration and were able to whittle down. I think our original request was $834,500, but we were able to whittle that down to a total of actually $480,000, which is less than what they're what's shown on the form itself, and I'll go through that. Our police boilers were originally requested at $450,000. They're in need of replacing. They're at their useful life, and that was based on state contract. We were able to work with our mechanical engineer on selecting different units that would still do the job and be just as reliable, and that would save $100,000 at $350,000. We agree with the police cell block plumbing improvements. We were able to get that work done. That's scheduled at the end of the month, and that was using operating expenses. So we were able to get that done. The duct cleaning, we were able to reduce from $50,000 to $30,000. That's our recommendation. The fire headquarters, instead of spending we actually had $250,000. Instead of spending that full amount, we'd rather get better numbers. We'd rather have it fully engineered and designed. So what we recommended was to reduce that $200,000 to $50,000. That's only design work. And once we have that and we have the bidding documents prepared, we could get better pricing. And then lastly, there was the building improvements account that's asked for in engineering. We'll get to that shortly. I would take that $50,000 out. And the DeHart Ball reconstruction of $50,000. Unfortunately, that was the last field that was impacted by Tropical Storm Ida that that field was really never fully tended to, so we're recommending $50,000 for that. In total, it's a total of $480,000.
It's frustrating because we're spending $150,000 resurfacing a tennis court that was incorrectly done right in the beginning of my service on the township committee. And then we're doubling the cost of a spray ground in such a short time, but we're spending $1 million resurfacing the pool all at once. ...
Okay. Mr. DeLuca, I see you're ready.
Yeah,
to
I'm
say-
sorry. Mr. Schuster, we got a list of building improvements from the South Essex Fire Department. Are any of those in this calculation?
Some of them have been included, I believe, in the operating budget. Is it correct, Mr. Kaloje? I recall us looking at those. Some of them were actually repairs, which we are not responsible for, but the ones that we did have in there would be a contribution. Am I remembering that correctly, Mr. Kaloje?
Yes, Mr. Schuster, we took a look. I guess the major ticket item would be the electrical that SCFD had put before us. And the recommendation here is to bring in the design, get the design work done, and then budget accordingly to actually get it repaired or replaced.
It's also possible we haven't captured all of that just yet because we just received all that information recently. So we'll take a we'll look back on that, and make sure we captured everything appropriately.
Thank you.
Other discussion on this request? All right, we'll move on, Mr. Kittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on to 2301, Municipal Road Reconstruction and Repairs, various locations. Our original ask was 1.8 million. We did meet with administration, and we were able to bring that total down to approximately 1.2 million. And that 1.2 million has a series of roads that we were recommending: Richmond Avenue from Parker to the municipal border with South Orange, Gerard Place, Valley Street to Osborne Terrace, Brown Street, Boyden Ave to Jacoby, Henry Place, Brown Street to the end, Hudson Avenue, Parker Avenue to Irvington Ave, Donnell Road, Oakview to the fire headquarters, Hilton Avenue, Vermont Street to Tuscan Street, Rutgers Street, Burnett Ave to Springfield Avenue, Highland Place, Maplewood Ave to Everett Place, and Tuscan Road, Valley Street to Bowdoin. So that was our estimate for 1.2 million for those streets. And
Mr. Kittner, what was the last one that you said after Highland, Maplewood Avenue?
Tuscan Road, Valley Street to Bowdoin Street.
Okay, and that was all of those for 1.2, or was that your original 1.8?
That's all for 1.2. Our original 1.8 went beyond that as well.
Mr. Kittner, did you say Harding or not?
Nope.
No, I said Henry Place. Harding
Henry, okay.
joins Brown, and that was not included on this.
So what got cut from this list to get it to 1 million? Which is the
So-
recommendation.
1.2 million, I thought it was.
Well, it's 1 million too, and then I thought I saw on the spreadsheet, the recommendation is 1 million.
So looking at the road list, there's a number of streets that we would consider cutting to make it to 1 million. So one street was Highland Place. It's in bad shape. It's obviously part of our downtown. But that's something that we might be able to do an overlay if we were to consider cutting it. The other street is Tuscan Road. It does have school access, and it's a major collector road. But in terms of its condition, it's not as bad as the other roads, and DPW just did in the last month extensive pothole repairs there. The other roads would be Henry Place and Brown Street. Just based on their condition, we could consider doing an overlay there as well. And if you recall in the operating budget, I extended the balance of overlays just for this purpose. There is another option that I'm going to throw out there, and that is one of our capital requests was for parking lot reconstruction. And we had, I believe, $250,000 allocated for that. The real intention for that was our town hall municipal lot. Once the EV chargers were done, we were going to pave it. But getting the EV chargers and the transformer work done is probably going to encompass this year, and I doubt we're going to get to that. So one thing that the committee could consider is taking out that line item for various parking lot improvements. I believe it was 23-12 at 250,000, so that we can maintain this list at 1.2 million.
And just so everyone knows that I had already recommended that for removal, not for that purpose, but just already recommended that for deferment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see some of the other roads that we hear from residents about the time. I mean, one of them, and I know from personal experience because I have friends over there and I visit them, and it needs an overlay, it needs everything. Garfield Place, we've talked about Garfield a lot. I don't see Garfield on here. Mr. DeLuca mentioned Harding. And then on the other side of town, Mr. Kittner, you and I sat down with a couple of residents, if you recall, on Washington Park, and they were talking about some of the issues they've suffered there, mostly related to Tropical Storm Ida.
Mayor, we did it. I'm sorry, we did a pretty extensive overlay at Washington Park in 2022.
Okay, never mind then. But what about some of these other, maybe take out Highland and substitute it with Garfield?
We can look into that. I'd have to calculate the quantities of the lace. I don't know if it's a equal substitution, but that's certainly something we could look at.
Mr. DeLuca, did you want to speak to Harding?
Mayor, I think it's very important that we do the roads that Mr. Kittner said would be cut if we reduce this by another 250. We're already taking it 1.8 to 1.2. And I would urge us to, again, reject the recommendation and fund it at 1.25.
Yeah, I'm with that too. I mean, the roads are really critical. We all use them. Our students use them, our crossing guards. We all drive over them, and the public utilities love to tear them up. So I really do think that we should try and stick this to the 1.2 reduction, the initial reduction, and not further reduce.
No, we're overdue doing some of these roads. And also, just as a side point, if we can make sure the roads are done to the same quality uniformly across town, that would be great.
Thank you.
Mr. Kittner, do we do any micro paving in town to extend the life of some of these roads?
No, we have not done micro paving.
Is there a reason we don't do it?
Well, it's something I could look into and see if it's something I think that would benefit us. I'll look into that and report back to the committee.
Okay, so that was good discussion too. We rejected the 1 million. We're back at 1.25 for the roads that we enumerated on the record. Let's move on to the next item.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item, 2302, is DPW environmental abatement. I don't know if you recall, but last year I did ask for an additional 400,000 above what was funded in 2022 for the abatement. Based on the latest projection, because of cost increases, we're looking at a total of 1.5 million to clean up the grounds and the soils and groundwater that were impacted as a result of the leaking of former storage tanks that were underground. Those have since been removed. We've also, constructed our above ground fueling center, which most of everyone's aware of. And the committee has also bonded, I believe, $1 million of this cost. So as a result, I'm asking for the additional $495,000. We have a plan set that is shovel ready. It's ready to be bid. We just need the funding. DEP is requiring us to finish it this year. The time it would start is actually May 15th. That's after spring cleanup. We purposely timed it that way. And it would be finished by September 15th.
Okay, and that is also recommended. Any discussion about this?
No,
All
let's
right.
make it happen.
Yeah, let's move on then.
Okay, moving on, 2303. Building improvements at various locations. Our original request was 1.6 million. I believe I've been able to pare this list down pretty substantially. The latest list I have is 1.125 million. And what that includes is the miscellaneous building improvements at $150,000. That account is critical for unforeseen improvements and things that are required during the year. The Hilton Roof Library at 215,000. That's enables us to install synthetic slate at that building. That by the way is shovel ready. The plans are ready to be publicly bid. And then the Civic House general improvements, we're requesting $425,000. Parapet wall on the roof is in terrible shape. And that work has been postponed several years. Again, those plans are shovel ready. The only difference is with that plan, I have to go back to HPC, go over a couple things and get an approval from them. But they've seen it and they've gone through it in the past. The next item was the town hall gutters. Originally, I had requested $300,000 to replace the piping, which is very old, but I wanted to pull that cost back. And we actually solicited pricing to get it TV'd and cleaned at the total of approximately $30,000. So I'm willing to reduce that, recommending, I should say, that reduce that amount from 300,000 to approximately 50,000. And that would enable us to TV all the lines, clean them, and assess the condition of the pipes around the building. The next item is the town hall structural supports at $75,000. They're in need of replacing, and that's the entrance if you're walking from the back of the building into the building from the parking lot. It's the entrance on the right-hand side. It's simply replacing out all the structural supports. And lastly, it's the senior building ramp replacement where we're requesting $60,000. We bid that out previously. It was shovel ready. And we had the funding in place, but we thought we had the funding in place. It turned out to be more expensive than originally anticipated. So the grand total afterwards, I believe, is 1.1 million. I'm looking for the recommendation from administration. Do you have that amount?
It's 975.
Oh, I see, 975.
So there's a reduction of 150. So if we accept that, what's being deferred?
Mr. Kidner had already talked about that. That was the reduction down to $50,000 for the town hall gutter repair. So there's really, although it shows up as a reduction, he's able to do everything he requested there.
Right, and once we do that, that's how we get to the number that administration recommended.
Got it. Terrific. Next.
Okay, moving on, 2304, Maple Terrace drainage improvements. Just getting caught up here. Sorry. Here it is. So I originally requested $100,000 for this, thinking that just based on the price increases I've seen throughout across the board for all of our projects, I wanted just a cushion. And there's also there's a wetland component, there's a mitigation component that will be required with this project in the amount of $30,000 to $50,000. We're not exactly sure, it's an estimate. But right now we have approximately $470,000 of funding. Our consulting engineer, MB5, believes that's enough to get the actual construction work complete. And based on the input from DEP, if we don't get comments back from them, and if it's not deemed administratively complete and get their technical review in the next 2 months or so, it's going to be very difficult to actually build this year. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schuster, you were recommending to defer this until next year. Is that correct?
That is correct, simply because I do not believe that this will occur this year.
I just want to get better information about what the 100,000 was for.
It was mainly for the to basically account for anticipated cost increases as a result of the construction based on what we've seen. After talking with NV5, they believe that the 470,000 that we have budgeted right now in Edmonds is sufficient for the construction work. The only question I have is the mitigation that hasn't been calculated yet by DEP. That will be a component that's required with this project. We're estimating it will probably be around $30,000, give or take.
Right. So I would move to reject the recommendation. This is also a project that's very visible in the community. We all know what happened here and why these improvements are necessary. It's been written about nationally. I think it would be also, as we talked about the spray park, disrespectful to the widow and the family and to other residents on this street who witnessed the horrific death of our neighbor to not lock this in, just like we locked in the spray park. Lock it in. If we don't need 100K and we have enough with the 470, then we don't use it, right? But and we put it towards other things. But I think it's important to go on the record and add it in, because Mr. Kittner, if you are sensing that you're going to need a little bit more beyond the 470 to do mitigation, you're probably correct. Other discussion?
I agree.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
2305, Mayor, is utility repairs and improvements at various locations. This is basically it's listed as $100,000. I actually increased that recommendation to 150 and that's just based on what we're seeing in terms of our infrastructure. It's getting older. You know, most recently, I don't want to list the area, but we had a discovery of a storm sewer that was leaking and in need of serious repair and or replacement. So the cost, the infrastructure is aging. It's nice having an account at hand that we can pay for some of these repairs that are invariably necessary each year.
Mr. Kittner, you have here for both sanitary and stormwater. Now, sanitary work, we've always tried to make sure that we're capturing enough in the sewer fee to cover the sanitary lines. Do you have a sense of how much of this would be for sanitary versus the stormwater? Maybe percentage wise, or?
It's probably 50-50 to be conservative. I would recommend that.
Yeah, I think our practice has been, when we spend this kind of either repairs or preventive maintenance on the sanitary lines, which is covered by the joint, which goes to the joint meeting, that we look at the sewer fee to see if that should be adjusted each year. I don't remember when we adjusted it a few years back, but I think 50,000. I think we have about 9,000 accounts. So, $5 increase would give us the 50,000, right?
I think that might be a Joe K question, but yeah, exactly. If it's 75,000, it's a nominal increase.
Yeah. mean, I think we should keep it in and maybe we could talk more about because Mr. Colosi, when do we settle on the SOAR fee each year? We're right about now, correct?
Typically, the TC would set the fee sometime in April, the latest, so that we can get out bills in May and collect the money in June.
Can we ask the finance committee to take a look at this to see if there is a recommendation to capture? I mean, there might be other things in the capital budget that are related to sanitary sewers that we could look at capturing in the fee.
Sure, we'll do. Next item.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Moving on, 2306 DOT Springfield Avenue. This is a municipal aid project. Basically, Springfield Avenue is looking tired. It's looking a little old, and we're looking to start reinvesting back into that and picking it up. We did apply for a municipal aid grant for this. We did receive $475,260 of funding for this purpose. And my recommendation would be not to do the full extent this year, the full 2 million. I would cut this in half. Let's call it 1 million. And of that 1 million, we're getting $475,000 from DOT. We would just have to ask DOT for a scope modification. We've done that for other projects such as Midland Boulevard, and I would not anticipate having an issue with DOT to do that.
Any discussion?
I have a question. Because we got the state grant, are you saying that we would put up 600,000 and then 400 would be from the state, or do we have to put the whole million up?
I'm not exactly sure how you talk about the MPP funds?
No, I'm talking about, so you're saying
I
the
see.
allocation is $1 million. If we're going to
Yes.
spend $1 million and we're getting 475 from the state.
Right, I can answer that. So technically it's a reimbursement.
Okay.
You have to front the money and then you get it back, but municipal aid is kind of unique because it's the only program that I'm aware of where as soon as you award the project, you submit a voucher and you get 75% of the cost, wired to you pretty quickly. Do you agree with that, Mr. Colosi?
Yes, I think what's unique about this is from a statutory perspective, if we're getting any kind of state or federal grant for projects like this, we are not required to put the 5% down. So the more sound fiscal practice is to budget for the full amount that you need because we don't have to put 5% down. We would then get the grant money in, and then there would be a resolution to cancel the balance between the grant money offsetting what we originally established as the ability to raise by borrowing.
Any
Okay,
questions on this, Mayor?
I don't think so. I think we've discussed it. Any other questions? We'll move on. I think the next item is the CDBG electric 88 jitney bus. We've discussed this a lot. Any issues here?
Mayor, this is actually modified. This became the senior bus, and I think the total was revised to, if I'm not mistaken, $275,000 for this. So it's no longer the 466. It's not a jitney bus. It's a senior bus, and it's 275.
It's 275 and it's recommended. We'll move on. I really want to talk a little bit about this item, in particular, the traffic calming various locations. This went down by about 50,000. Can we talk about that?
I'm sorry, the recommendation's 150 right now from administration. So the answer is traffic calming is used throughout the whole township. Obviously, we not only pay our consultants, traffic engineers, but we also install improvements, speed humps, striping plans, radar mounted speed limit signs that provide feedback. And, it makes a difference in our community. So it's a very important topic to fund. I think it's really critical for us to have an adequate balance for that. Of course, we'll work with whatever budget the committee sees fit. We'll make it the very best we possibly can. But typically we use anywhere from 150 to 250 a year in traffic calming, and at least that's been the latest trend.
Do you find that reducing it by 50,000 compromises your efforts? though?
It can limit, depending on what we decide to do, it can limit some of the improvements that we're making in that given year. So it can limit it. Again, I'll work with whatever budget you see fit, but I presented the 200. That's the budget that I'd like to see if possible, if funding.
What did you spend last year on traffic calming?
I don't, Joe, do we have that number? Mr. Kaloje, I'm sorry.
If you give me a second, I will see if I can find it.
Okay.
Mr. Kittner, can we, I mentioned this like 6 years ago, I think. I feel like we need to have engineering and police maybe be in more communication with regard to traffic calming. I think we could do better on the police side with regard to enforcement and, speed control in areas that are, that we get complaints about. And I feel like that's been lacking over the years and forcing us to spend money on capital projects and speed humps and all that kind of stuff. So I would ask that you work more closely with police on these projects instead of just automatically, making improvements.
Ms. Adams, I know you've been a proponent of that, absolutely, and I just want to let you know I have worked with police more extensively. There's always room for improvement, but I've worked with police on trying to increase, policing and putting in, the radar-mounted speed limit signs and additional patrols. So I have coordinated with Sergeant Reeves and Chief Sally. So, but we'll continue.
Right. Right, Mr. Kittner, isn't that part of your analysis and whether you recommend a traffic calming measure that's been requested? You work with police, you get traffic accident data, you put out the radar, you coordinate all that with police, no?
That was part of our petition, but as of late, we've been actually doing the traffic counts ourselves because we have more equipment and more ability to do that. So we've been doing the counts ourselves for the most part.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the analysis, Mayor. I'm talking about trying to get, there's just some places where we could do more, I think, with spotted enforcement on areas that we know or we're getting complaints about that they're speeding, and see if that abates the issue a little bit more than jumping right to improvements.
Understood.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, to interrupt, but in 2022, we had a capital budget of $250,000 for traffic calming. We spent $167,000 of it. We have $81,459 encumbered. So we have a current balance available from last year's funds for traffic calming of roughly $1,400.
Okay.
So we should lower this.
No,
1,400,
1,400,
yeah.
$1,400. I'm with you, Mayor. We should put the 50 back.
Yeah, I think we should. That's why I asked the question about last year's number, because we appropriated 150, but it came in at 167. Isn't that what you just said, Mr. Kaloje?
I just closed the window. My apologies, Mayor. Let me find it again.
Oh, that's okay.
Yes, we had allocated 250,000. We had spent 167,000, and we have currently encumbered 81,500 in rough numbers.
Right, that's 240,000.
Right.
So I think 250 is appropriate.
Okay, so are we moving that we reject this recommendation and add the 50 back?
I'm for that.
Just for clarifications, Mr. DeLuca just said something else. The request was for 200. Did you just say you wanted 250 or go
No,
back?
I'm sorry. If what was the 200? Sorry.
200.
200. Okay.
I want to reject. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking at.
I'm just looking for any dollar I can right now.
I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, and nothing personal about any of this, Mr. Schuster, or to anyone, of course. This is why we do this. This is very tough stuff that we're doing. These are
Oh,
tough.
I don't take it personally. People go over my head all the time and you can see the results.
Okay, so are we all in agreement about that at 200, the original request? All right, we'll move on then to the next item.
Thank you, Mayor. 2309 EV chargers townwide. So our original request was for $400,000. We have the town hall transformer at $150,000. That is a 1-year lead time. We have additional cost of EV chargers at town hall at $100,000. That's level 2 and level 1 chargers. And then we have an additional cost for EV chargers throughout the township at $150,000. Total cost is $400,000. I will say we do have a DEP grant in the amount of $8,000 per level 2 chargers outside of town hall. It equates to about $40,000. And I think at town hall, we got a grant for the level 1 chargers. So 10 of them at $750 a piece, which is approximately a $7,500 grant at town hall.
And have we applied for some of the other grants that are available at the state level for this stuff?
I wasn't aware that any were available for this, but I will say that we did discuss with PSE&G. There's also infrastructure grants that they give through the BPU, and they have some very competitive incentives for that. So I've been talking with Mr. McQueen from PSE&G on those programs.
Okay, so are we accepting this recommendation? It's a reduction by about 100 from 400 to 300.
And that's deferring the EV chargers at town hall.
At town hall.
Right. Are we good with this? Any discussion? No, move on. Okay, moving on.
Moving on to 2310 in-house engineering services. This is really just an accounting system. Mr. Kaloje, you want to just describe that briefly?
Yes, it's been our past practice here in the town to allocate funds that would normally go to an outside engineering firm to oversee the road projects to doing that in-house. We then bill ourselves and we charge the capital fund for what is essentially an operating cost.
Right. No discussion here. We've been through this before. We'll move on to the next item.
Moving on to 2311 Village Center parking lot.
Oh, yes, this is another biggie. Okay, here we go.
So I don't have the exact numbers, but I believe, Mr. Kaloje, we have approximately 400,000. Let me see here. We have 150,000 for one account and 260,000 through another account. So we have approximately just over 400,000 in funding that has been allocated for this project. You know, the project has evolved from when it first started, I think, through the discussions with the merchants and through our various discussions. The project has evolved, and I think part of the reason for the cost increase is making this more of an aesthetic improvement. And then we, of course, added the sidewalk. That was part of the original 450,000. But you know, the price has gone up. Obviously, the cost increase is realized. If we were to move forward with this project as it's designed, and it is designed right now, then I would allocate $600,000 at a minimum, with perhaps a $50,000 contingency for a total of $650,000. I think during our Engineering, Public Works, and Planning Committee, we discussed doing what was truly not an aesthetic improvement, but a safety improvement, and that's the sidewalk along the NJ Transit tracks. That cost would be approximately $150,000 to $200,000 is our estimate. And, you know, we have funding for that right now. So I think there should be, you know, it's up to you, Mayor, but there, you know, the cost has gone up substantially, and I think you had expressed some reservations on this in the past, so I just we can move forward and do, for example, the phase one improvement, which is the sidewalk, and we'll bid out the other portions as bid alternates and see what kind of pricing we get from that. If we have available funding to fund it, great. If we don't, then it's something that we can at least get the safety improvements, the sidewalk complete.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul, and I think you'll get agreement from the rest of the committee. I think we should focus on the sidewalk. The walking path along the train is a public safety hazard. We should get that done. We have money to pay for it. And we have to reconsider this. I don't want this to die, however. I do think there are other public safety hazards in this parking lot. And we really need to address them. And I would just correct the record just a little bit. I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying that actually the merchants wanted to be a little more conservative about what we do back there, because they know that this could be a 3 to 4 month project. And having the Village Center lot inaccessible for that long during any part of the season or year would be a major inconvenience and hardship to all. So I just think that this mushroomed because of everything else, all the construction costs, and because we all got really excited about making some of those beautification improvements. But there is a public safety hazard in this parking lot. We need to correct the traffic flow, as we've discussed. There are accidents there all the time. It is a miracle that no one has been seriously injured. And anything goes back there, and it's a mess, and it's really not. It's the first thing that people see in our downtown, and it's really not indicative of who we are. So we should focus on this for next year. But for now, we should just focus on the sidewalk. Is that how everybody else feels about it? Bless you, Miss Adams. I saw you sneezing. Any discussion?
Is there any potential for patching or anything to be done? Because that parking lot's a nightmare, and to park in it is difficult because the lines have faded. And some folks, I think, out of just sheer frustration or just being jerks, are not parking with neighbors in mind. So yes, absolutely work on the sidewalk, because that is an even bigger nightmare. But can something be done about making some of the holes that your car almost gets swallowed by in that parking lot?
Committee, right? That's absolutely a great idea, and we will address that. Yes.
Okay, so we have a little bit of money to also do some overlays there.
Yes.
And maybe some micro paving, as Miss Adams suggested. We should look into that. All right, move on. We're getting there. We're getting there to the end of engineering. Are we getting there?
Almost.
Oh, okay, let's do this.
Okay, so 2312 is municipal parking lot reconstruction, various locations. I spoke about this earlier. Essentially, this was geared towards town hall, refinishing that parking lot once the EV chargers are done. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schuster, you're looking to defer this into next year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I don't disagree with that necessarily, because I don't think I think getting the EV chargers in is going to take some time.
Agreed. And this parking lot is absolutely not in the shape that the Village Center parking lot.
It's a gym comparatively.
Yeah. Yes. It's a nice blacktop comparatively. All right, let's move on.
Moving on, 2313 PSE&G matching roads. So PSE&G is continuing with their gas main upgrade in the Ridgewood section. They did a lot of work last year. We were able to leverage the credits that we received for their road disturbance and work on projects such as the swale project that we know we're going to pave, and actually get all of the roads that they disrupted last year, at least get them on schedule to be paved, or they were paved last year full width. And this year is a little different. PSE&G's position is we will pave half of the road width, but we're not going to pave the full road width. And a lot of these roads are in bad shape to begin with. So this credit is just taking into consideration all of the roads that they're doing this year and matching those road payments that other half width, so we can get it paved the full width. And it's actually not $150,000. That was the original request. It actually was increased to $300,000 for all of these roads.
Right, and that was also recommended.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Paul, they don't need to go curb to curb?
They do not need to go curb to curb when the road is not in a moratorium.
Oh,
That's by our ordinance.
yeah.
We got to look into that, and we have to do some
Yeah.
state advocacy too.
Yeah.
Code committee.
For the for the roads that have actually already been worked on by them, are they going to be addressing the condition of some of the roads that were left, and not brought to the same level of workmanship that other roads are?
So some of the roads that were that had mains installed in them as part of this program, and again, this is primarily this is the Ridgewood area. Those roads will be paved full width. They have not finished all the paving because the weather turned. They had to shut operations down for a period of time. But those roads will be paved full width in that area as part of this program. Now, I just want to note, just for clarity, PSE&G is working on other projects that affect streets. It's just not part of this program. So this money is strictly part of that program for that Upper Ridgewood gas main project that they're working on.
Okay, we'll move on.
2314 environmental improvements at various locations. This is really just, I like to put some type of amount in because invariably during the year, we come across a building with asbestos or some type of environmental condition that we have to address. And this is a fairly nominal amount, which, just assists us with addressing those items.
Yeah. That's cheap compared to your other requests, Mr. Paper.
And that should go right through, right?
Let's talk about safe routes to schools.
So Safe Routes to Schools, this is a program, this is a grant that we got approved on and received. It's a total of $488,000 of funding. Looking at this, we're anticipating that in addition to the funding that we received, we're going to need some additional monies to make the project a reality and to make it comply with all of the requirements and standards that we have to do this. This, by the way, takes approximately 50 different locations and adds rapid flashing beacons and push button signal heads for pedestrian crossings at crosswalks. So this is really an important project to help pedestrian safety, and it's all throughout the whole township. So I think it's a great project. We're starting to get this, off. It's got to be designed, but we need the money in place so that we can, move forward with the project.
Yep. Any discussion here?
So just to be clear, the net of this is 112,000?
The net, when all is said and done, we're asking for an extra 112,000, but keep in mind, it's a reimbursement grant.
Yes, yeah.
And because it's federal funds, they're very much sticklers in terms of getting reimbursed. So it could take up to a year to get reimbursed. That's what we experienced when we did Clinton Elementary.
So in our spreadsheet, why does it say recommended 600K? What am I missing?
We have to pay for it in front and then apply for the money to get it back.
Yeah, it's a reimbursement.
So when the request originally came in, we thought we were going to have to upfront everything. So all you're seeing is the updated charges to reflect that we don't have to do everything up front. It's going to be it's going to be offsetting. We don't have to bond out the entire amount.
Got it. Okay. Meadowbrook Place drainage improvements.
So Meadowbrook Place, I originally put this in because we had a few residents reach out to us, and to have improvements in the area of 24 Meadowbrook Place. And this was discussed in a number of engineering, public works and planning committee meetings. So we had NV5, Fred Scher, actually perform a study and come up with some recommendations. He came up with 3 different scenarios, A, B, and C. And looking at this, comparing the cost and how difficult it would be to secure this, there's a number of easements that are going to be required, from the nearby development and condominium complex. So that's going to take time. It also has to be designed, and we need NJDEP permits. So when we factor all of that in, we don't anticipate being able to complete this year, which is why we're deferring this.
Okay, are we okay with this? All right, we'll move on.
I'm sorry, I just want to go back to something that Mr. Schuster said on the other one. Mr. Schuster, the initial request was 112. Aren't we now putting in 600,000?
Yeah,
Yes, I believe I believe the initial request there was an error as it netted. It shouldn't have netted out
Okay.
originally. The original request actually should have been $600,000.
You're correct, Mr. Schuster.
Okay,
And just to repeat, because it is a federal grant, we will not be required to come up with the 5% down payment for this. So it
Okay.
won't have an effect on the operating budget in 2023.
so right now we've cut about $2 million out of what we need a down payment on, the Springfield Ave, this, and the pool.
Yes, the calculation, however, for the operating budget already backed those numbers out.
Mr. Kaloje. Okay, thank you.
okay, let's move on to, where were we? Engineering electric vehicle.
Yes, so we're looking to purchase an electric vehicle for the engineering group. And this would be a vehicle that we would use to do site visits, and we just need a vehicle to use. And it's been hit or miss with the vehicles that we have at Town Hall right now. So a lot of our fleet is aging and it's getting older and less reliable, and accidents, etc. The fleet has decreased in size, I think. So we're simply requesting it for consideration.
And this is one I also tagged for deferment.
I agree to defer it. Although I like the electric aspect.
Mr. Kittner, do you not have a vehicle to get around in?
We have a vehicle. It's just it's aging and it's often used by other people as well. So we share it.
Right. And you spend thousands of dollars, because I signed the POs to keep it functioning.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well, I think, is there any discussion on this one? Ms. Croy, Ms. Engel?
When's the last time you guys got a new vehicle?
I received the vehicle, I think, 2 years ago. But I don't think the vehicle that I don't think it was handed down to engineering. I think another department took it, if I'm not mistaken.
You mean you don't have it anymore? It was taken from you?
I know I have a vehicle, but the vehicle, normally it gets handed down, the vehicle I was using before, and it would get handed down to the engineering group. And I think our vehicle was sent to another department, if I'm not mistaken.
So instead of
Got
having
it.
2 vehicles, you're down to, you just still have one.
Right, and we share another vehicle with other departments.
Right, and didn't we ask, Ms. Barnett, didn't we ask you to come up with a plan so that all the departments working at Town Hall could share vehicles?
Yes.
Okay,
So maybe we should look at that plan, Ms. Barnett. So,
Yes, we did have one that was in place with folks using them. And to my knowledge, everybody had adequate vehicles under it. So we would just need to revise it. Or are you suggesting that we return to like the shared pool where people return their keys every day?
I'm
Yeah,
suggesting that the administration deal with it.
right, figure it
Okay,
out.
yes, yes, my apologies. I thought that that had been handled, so I'll revise that.
Okay, great. And we'll get you, Mr. Kittner. We're gonna move on. We are gonna defer this request and move on to your next request.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. 2318, reconstruction of roads impacted by Ida. So we have a plan set that is bid ready. It's actually on the street now. We're gonna see what pricing we get. But what happened was, we originally anticipated the cost to be approximately $750,000. And working with the consulting engineer based on site conditions, revising the design, drilling down into the details, there were some additional stormwater improvements that were recommended as part of the base bid. It's substantially, our focus is this. We basically took the project, we broke it up into a base bid, which is swales and roads that were damaged by Ida. And then we have bid alternates, which are improvements and enhancements to the stormwater collection system to make it more resilient against flooding. So we'll see where the pricing comes in. But right now we have $750,000 of funding. We're asking for an additional $250,000 to be able to, fund the base bid at a minimum, plus perhaps a bid alternate or two to try to increase the resiliency. But we're not sure where the pricing comes in. It may come in really good. We may get great pricing and maybe less than the engineer's estimate. But, we hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Okay, and that was your last request. There was a couple that are part of OSTF, and so that you can go and enjoy the rest of your evening with your family and not have to wait for the OSTF to get your opinion. Do you want to address those two items? One of them is the summer intern, actually 3 items. The summer intern, can we go to that one first? It's really easy peasy. Summer intern, 22,000.
Right, so that is a reoccurring request each year. Essentially, it's a summer intern, and it's a landscape consultant that we use, and they're both fantastic programs. It's well worth the money, and we'd recommend awarding that money and
Yes.
funding this.
Any discussion on this? Okay, wonderful. And then before we let you go, 2 more things. Trees. You have a request for 50 originally through DPW. The recommendation is for 25. Can you give us a sense of how many trees 50 covers?
So trees, if you use a base cost of $250 per tree, that will buy you 200 trees. All right, and again, when you're talking about Memorial Park, the cost may increase. It could easily double, based on the species that are required for that park. But using 250 as a general rule of thumb is probably a good number. And you're looking at approximately 200 trees based on the 250 a tree.
Sure, thank you for that. And how many of those 250 trees can you plant in 1 year?
200 trees, Mayor, but
200, sorry, yeah.
we could absolutely get it planted this year if the money's allocated.
200 trees.
Yes.
When you going to do all that? On
Well,
top of everything else you got to do.
last year, I think we planted over 200 trees, and the year before that, I think we planted 260 trees, 280 trees. So it's not just DPW. We could also look into certain consultants to do that as well, and contractors.
Okay. And Mr. Schuster, I know that you recommended a reduction by half here. What was your reasoning?
So if I recall correctly, I made the reduction, then found a place to hide from Ms. Adams. After that, I also I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Colosier, that there is still some money left in that fund that we recognize could have been used.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
OSTF recommends 75,000 for this. And a lot of that has to do with the enormous loss of trees in Maple Crest Park that's impacting the drainage. And the discussion at OSTF was with regard to buying more mature trees that can survive being planted basically in water in Maple Crest Park and helping that drainage situation. Paul?
And yeah, just to expand on what Miss Adams said, you know, when you walk Maple Crest Park, I mean, it's really pretty sad. It's very sad. A lot of the mature trees have died. You see the remnants of them. And, you know, it could be that species, I'm not a tree expert, but it could be that species was just not suitable for that environment. And it's just a matter of selecting the right species that, you know, is still a native species, a native plant. And, you know, that they may thrive in that area, but it's just sad to see all of our mature trees die. I think climate change has taken a tremendous and has had a tremendous impact on our trees in the parks.
And Mr. Colosier, what was the amount left in the fund that we had recognized was already there?
We currently have a balance of roughly $33,200 still available in park tree plant.
So my thought was with the original $50,000 request, cutting out 25,000 because there was already money existing in there to keep us at the original 50,000 request. Of course, understand that OSTF wanted to increase it to 75,000, so that's obviously at your discretion.
And just a comment about the trees, part of the reason so many of the shade trees have disappeared is because they've just also aged out. It's not necessarily species or location, it's just they got old and died. And that's townwide, so keep that in mind.
And
Also,
these trees can only, the open space trust money can only be spent for park trees, right? Not street trees?
correct.
Okay.
So that's why it would be, and that's what the discussion was, that Maple Crest is in desperate need of trees to help with the drainage rather than spending more hundreds of thousands of dollars on a drainage plan that Paul's been talking about too.
All right, I'm okay with increasing this to 75. How do others feel about it in light of this information?
No, we need the trees. That park is
I'm
almost
okay.
bald.
Yep, okay, great.
So just to clarify, are we increasing the 75 and still keeping the 32 or 33,000 in the bank? Or are we going to say, have the request that?
I'd like them to spend it and plant. There were underutilized funds for park trees. So usually it's about $50,000 annually from OSTF.
Yeah.
And last year or two, they haven't been spending it in the parks.
You're correct, and if we wanted to, we could certainly increase it to slightly over $100,000 of spending with what's already in the bank. Of course, that would deplete the savings that are there, but since it's an annual thing, it would be replenished. But happy to do whatever you feel is best. I don't even know if Mr. Kittner would be capable of doing $100,000 worth of work, but just wanted to make sure you all knew that that was an option.
Would these funds for tree planting, would any of that be eligible for the path that the Conservancy is talking about? Because those are trees, right?
It's mostly
Oh,
landscaping.
Okay.
But there are some trees in there.
Yeah, so I think that would be eligible, right?
I would think it would be.
Yeah, okay.
It would, and they have, but they're kind of, that project's not ready to go anywhere yet.
Okay.
Right, but we can have the money in there, right? And-
Yeah.
and So we have 30 something in the pot and we're talking about adding 75 as recommended by OSTF, which gets us to 100, right? Is that what we're? Yeah.
Right, and that comes from OSTF, so it's not.
Right.
Fine, but also the Memorial Park planted, I think, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, 48 trees last year.
Yeah, somewhere between 40 and 50, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but Maple Crest hasn't had any. If anything, they've had them taken down. So it's really important for Paul and Caesar to work with the arborist to try to figure out how to start replacing those, because they're not growing any faster, not planted.
Okay, terrific. I think we covered this thoroughly. Let's move on to your last item, Mr. Kittner, that also is, that was OSTF request.
Thank you, Mayor. The last request was for the Memorial Park Bridge. This is now the Library Bridge. And, you know, I included this in my original request, just in case the committee wanted to move forward with this. In retrospect, after attending the OSTF meeting and after talking with, you know, the architect and getting some more information on this, you know, I think at best we'd be constructing this bridge at the very tail end of the year, because we have not even started design plans for this. And just getting through, you know, the approval process through HPC and SHPO could take some time. So by the time you factor that in and the lead times to order the wood, I just don't know if it's a realistic project for this year. And, you know, it's closed down now. It's going to be closed down for next year as well. So maybe this is one we defer till, you know, till next year sometime.
I agree with that. Any discussion?
Nope, I'm good with that.
Okay, and that was it, Mr. Kittner. Any questions for Mr. Kittner that we didn't cover? Anything else, Mr. Kittner, you want to add?
I just want to thank everyone for their time. It was a pleasure to be here.
We want to thank you for your time too, sir. Thank you for hanging in with us. And Mr. Nelson, I know police is next, but you're here and I think we covered most of Open Space Trust Fund. So I'm gonna like rework the agenda right here on the spot. Are you willing to go next?
Yeah, you've kind of covered everything.
We did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we check in with you.
I will thank you. I appreciate it. I will put in my annual request for two things. One, the committee is, you know, prefers not to spend open space money on what we consider maintenance projects, but we fully understand, especially if you sit through this tonight, the budgetary restraints and needs of the township. And the other thing is, the final reminder is the biggest problem we have with open space is we don't have enough of it. So that still is a big unchecked box for the township. We just need more space upon which we can spend more money. So that's kind of it for us. We had talked a couple of years back about updating the open space element in the master plan. I'm still unclear if whoever's been contracted to do the township master plan would cover the individual elements or not. If not, we have had conversations with Morris Land Conservancy, just preliminary ones to see, you know, could they provide the update if the funds were available and if it's appropriate.
So, Mr. Nelson, on that point, I can assure you that the planning firm is scheduling to meet with you and the rest of the committee, because the steering committee had recommended that we add that open space as an element in our new master plan.
Okay.
So look out for that email from them, and I'm happy to connect you actually later tonight, just in case it fell off their radar or whatever.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, well, thank you for your time as
Can I
well.
just- Mr. Cloget, what Mr. Nelson said about the fixed amount, when we do the revaluation, do we get a bump up in the open space trust fund? Because the value goes up?
Yes, we would, because the value is going to go up and the ordinance established the rate at a penny per assessed value. So once we do that, you're going to see a significant increase in while that's not the case for assessed value on properties, because the rate will come down to match our budget, because this is a fixed rate outside of what is our standard tax rate. they would see a bump. That is correct.